Ladies and gentlemen, old friends and new ones, dear colleagues, dear partners from the German Federal Institute for VET, BIBB, and from the German Federal Ministry for Education and Research, BMBF, UNEVOC centers, greetings from Bonn. Before we start, please let me introduce myself. I'm Wilson Lima Jr., Build Project Manager at UNESCO-UNEVOC. With me here today, I have Vera Hark, my counterpart in BIBB. So it's our pleasure to welcome you today to this virtual space, where the Bridging Innovation and Learning in TVET conference on new qualifications and competencies will be held. I'm glad to share with you that the theme of our meeting has grasped the interest of TVET stakeholders from across the world. More than 70 countries are with us today, familiar faces and new ones, and it could hardly be any different. The relevance of the theme for the TVET community, or for us, of course, is well acknowledged. However, in a time of drastic change in the way we live, in the way we work, and of course, in the way we acquire our knowledge, the discussions on how to identify and implement new qualifications in a timely and responsive manner, catering for the needs of the society as a whole, and of the students in particular, have become even more pressing. And I'll be frank with you, the Build project is not proposing yet alternatives on how to respond to the needs of the society. What we are doing at this stage is bringing together different perspectives on the matter, perspectives that we expect are going to trigger discussions revolving around the issues of today's meeting. These inputs should be used to enlighten the path we have been forced to blaze in the recent past. But the Build project goes beyond providing an open platform for interactive and fruitful discussion such as this one today. As an example, next week, on Friday, 18th December, we will have the Kickstart meeting in the development of a publication that will address the main challenges faced by TVET-related institutions when identifying, integrating, and implementing new qualifications. For that, we are working with a team of 24 external experts from Africa, Asia Pacific, and Europe, and also with the UNEVOC network, the main asset of our organization, in developing 3 practically oriented guides to be launched in December 2021. Besides bringing new perspectives on new qualifications and competencies, we also intend, with this meeting, to lay the foundations for the upcoming project activities through an open and participatory engagement among all of us. As planned, much of the meeting time will be devoted to open discussions on the topics brought by our presenters. You may have noticed that this is quite a short and simple event, and it was on purpose. It is short because we wanted to cater to the needs of participants from different time zones. It is simple because we intend to explore our very basic competencies: speak, listen, and reflect. However, in an innovative manner and in the spirit of fostering the knowledge exchange, the speakers that will be with us today, and also UNESCO-UNEVOC and BIBB experts, will be available to you from today until next Friday, the 11th of December, at the UNESCO-UNEVOC TVET Forum, answering questions or debating points that have called your attention. The link for the TVET Forum is going to be shared right now with you in the chat box by my colleague Natalie X, Build Project Officer. Of course, questions posed during the conference that we are not able to answer today will be answered there in the TVET forum. Lastly, I would like to remind you of the meeting agenda. Following the opening remarks from the representatives of the partner institutions, we will proceed to the 3 interventions planned to happen today, when we will have the opportunity to learn about successful practices in the identification, integration, and implementation of new qualifications and competencies through practical examples from Africa, Asia, and Europe. I would like to add that the presentations will be preceded by insights from the Trends Map study on new qualifications and competencies, which was published by UNESCO-UNEVOC and BIBB 3 weeks ago. Moreover, after each of the presentation, we will have a round of discussions in which we invite you to share your questions, remarks, and why not, criticisms. Not too many, please. At the end of the event, we will invite participants to reflect on the content presented by the speakers today. So, I wish you a fruitful and rewarding event. And without any further delay, I pass the floor to my colleague Vera Hark, who will guide you through the check-in procedures and share some remarks on the housekeeping. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wilson, and welcome everyone on behalf of the German Federal Institute for VET, or BIBB for short, project partner in BUILD. I am Vera Haag, the BUILD project manager and technical advisor from BIBB. The BUILD project is carried out in collaboration with the UNEVOC network members. It is coordinated by UNESCO-UNEVOC, supported by BIBB, and sponsored by BMBF. It's really a delight to see how this event can take place virtually, and also how digital communication channels help us to stay connected. And I'm very much looking forward to your input during the event, and I would like to encourage your active participation via questions and comments. Before we start with the actual program, let us do a quick check-in. Now I need, yes, thank you to the technician. To do so, please present yourself via the chat with your name, your institution, and your country. Additionally, we would like to ask you to mention one expectation in the chat that you have towards today's conference. That may be an aspect you are especially interested in, or that you would like to meet partners from a specific region. This little check-in will allow for all of us to have an impression of the diversity of participants who have joined today's event. While you're writing in the chat, let me communicate some housekeeping suggestions. Throughout the conference, you may use the chat to ask questions. One of our colleagues will collect them, and we will try to take up as many as possible. You will also have the chance to make statements and ask questions at several points of the event with your video and microphone switched on. However, please keep both switched off for the moment. When we ask for your input, please use the hand raised function if you want to speak. This is under participants. When we give the floor to you, you may turn your microphone and your camera on. And finally, please note, this event will be recorded. A conference video will be made available to you shortly after the event. Now, let me invite you to promote this bridging conference by sharing posts on social media with the hashtag BUILD. I'm sure that some of you have taken the opportunity in the meantime to present themselves in the chat. And I would like to ask our colleague and BUILD project officer, Natalie from UNESCO-UNEVOC, if she could kindly share some impressions with us.
Yes, thank you, Vera, and welcome everyone also from my side. Yeah, the chat is very, very active, which is great, and we have around 100 almost 120 participants in the meeting already. So we are really glad to welcome such a diversity in terms of geography and institutions who joined. So yeah, we have, according to the registrations, we have almost 70 countries that registered, and about 25 from Europe, 15 from both Asia and the Pacific and Africa. So we are really delighted about this in the first place. Regarding expectations, we have really a focus on what is actually our focus as well for this event, namely learning from each other, learning about the latest developments, and taking up connections to fellow TVET stakeholders and yeah, people who are working on improving TVET and making it fit for the future. So I hope we can really turn this into, or give this life, this sense of collaboration and peer learning. So looking forward to our discussions today and learning the latest developments from our examples. And with that, back to you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It's great to see how many of you joined today, how diverse our participants are today. Thank you for taking part in this check-in. I'm really looking forward to exchanging with you today. I'd now like to give the floor to Ms. Sue Choi, Director of UNESCO-UNEVOC, who kindly agreed to address a few welcoming words to our audience today. Please, Ms. Choi, we're eager to hear from you.
Distinguished guest speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to this Bridging Conference on New Qualifications and Competencies in TVET, which is organized by the Bridging Innovation and Learning in TVET project. I would like to express a special thanks to our institutional partners, BIBB and BMBF, for their continuing support in the promotion of TVET and of the BUILT project in particular. Ongoing global disruptions have led to reflections on what qualifications and competencies are needed to build a resilient workforce. TVET systems often find it difficult to keep pace with changes in the world of work. But studies have shown that it is possible to bridge this gap through the well-timed identification and implementation of relevant qualifications and competencies. This is where UNESCO-UNEVOC comes in. As UNESCO's designated Center for TVET, UNESCO-UNEVOC is uniquely placed to compile the learnings and experiences from TVET institutions around the world, and even more so to promote them and make them available to a global audience through our UNEVOC network. Today, this online conference provides an excellent opportunity to fulfill this mandate of ours. Please engage in the discussions and share your experiences and see how these learnings could be applied to different contexts. As you might have noticed, this is the first BUILT event bringing together all three regions involved in the project, namely Africa, Asia and the Pacific, and Europe. In the interest of global collaboration, we have also invited TVET institutions worldwide to join the discussion. We look forward to building bridges between all three BUILT regions and strengthening peer learning efforts in the TVET community around the world. Finally, I would like to invite you to help one another to advance, to learn from each other, and to take advantage of the opportunities provided here today. I wish all of you an enriching conference and even more so continuing collaboration that in the end benefits TVET learners worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Sue has touched upon one of the main existing challenges for the TVET institutions. And it is, I quote, the need for us to keep pace with the world of work, in which changes are happening in a fast evolving pace. The search for alternatives on how to deal with this issue is in the core of the BUILT project. We strongly believe that the project can contribute to the identification of main challenges and proposition of answers on how to shorten the time frame between the identification of the competence and the delivery of new qualifications and competencies. Inspired by the words that Sue shared with us, I now invite Mr. Michael Virchat, Head of Division in BIBB, to address this distinguished audience. But before that, just a reminder, as you saw in our agenda, we have interpretation to the French language available to you. So it's in the bottom of your screen, there's a button interpretation. You can find the French language available there. Thank you very much. So please, Michael Virchat, the floor is yours.
Dear Sue, distinguished guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, and friends. Allow me to welcome you cordially to our bridging conference on new qualifications and competencies in TVET. This conference is organized by the BUILD project team, composed of UNESCO-UNEVOC and BIBB staff. I would like to start thanking our institutional partners, UNESCO-UNEVOC, the German Ministry for Education and Research, and the global UNEVOC network. Special thanks goes to our partners and UNEVOC centers in Europe, Africa, and Asia for their great interest in peer learning, critical dialogue, and efforts to solve challenges together. For me, this is the foundation for promising results and beneficial impacts. What will be the central issue of this BUILD conference, which unfortunately can only take place virtually? This bridging conference will tackle the identification of new qualifications and competencies, their integration into curricula and training regulations, and finally, their implementation in TVET education and training. Let me emphasize two aspects which are related to this topic. Firstly, it is useful to understand these processes from the perspectives of three different levels of a TVET system. First aspect, different levels of a TVET system in the new qualifications and competences process. In the BUILD project, we are trying to analyze how the identification and integration of new qualifications and competences is steered at the macro or governance level by the state. Furthermore, we look how new qualifications and competences are developed on meso or development level by stakeholders such as development and research institutions and employer organizations and trade unions. Third, finally, on macro, micro, or implementation level, we are trying to understand how these qualifications and competences find their way into teaching, learning, and training schemes in schools, companies, and training institutions. The UNEVOC network is a platform that provides a wealth of experiences to explore the perspective of these levels. These levels do not equal with processes or identification, integration, implementation that we are looking today. They are involved in several of these processes. The second aspect. I would therefore like to take a closer look at this second aspect. How can new qualifications and competencies be integrated in curricula and training regulations? With the BUILD project, we propose 4 different approaches in this endeavor. First one, we identified the cross-cutting approach. With this approach, transversal competencies are integrated in all curricula and training regulations of a TVET system. The second approach is the occupation-specific approach. That means qualifications and competences are relevant for a specific occupation and the respective training regulation and curriculum. Third, we furthermore identified the sector-specific approach. Here the focus lies on qualifications and competences relevant for a specific economic sector, for example, construction, logistics, service sector. Finally, additional qualifications and competences are relevant for TVET. Sometimes these can be introduced as modules which complement initial and especially continuing TVET for a specific occupation or sector in order to allow a quicker response to new developments on the labor market. At the end, when using these approaches, we have to bear in mind the needs of stakeholders, actors, and practitioners on the related level. This allows us to describe good practices and concepts to stimulate ideas and feed discussions in new contexts and heterogeneous TVET systems. This virtual conference is a good opportunity for all of us to come up with new impressions and ideas, hopefully some answers to challenges and questions in your contexts, exchange of experience, controversial discussions, and finally, at the end, some good new digital relations. All the best for all of us, and keep well and fit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. You have noticed that he has provided a first glimpse in some of the concepts that are being developed in the scope of the BUILD project. And I would like to bring to you a new information. And in case you are interested in learning more about these concepts, I would invite you to please refer to the trends mapping study through the link that Natalie will share with you now in the chat. There, you'll be able to have an in-depth look at the concepts that have just been presented by Michael. It's my pleasure now to pass the floor to Dr. Oliver Deer, Deputy Head of Division of the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research, BMBF. Please, Oliver, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Dear colleagues, thank you, Wilson. It's my great pleasure to be with you today and to give you some insights of what I think is the future of TVET in Europe. Bridging innovation in TVET is a complex task, no doubt. It will become even more complex if we set out to identify and integrate new qualifications and competencies. The German Ministry of Education and Research supports this UNEVOC initiative, and we are convinced of the high need of updated, transparent, and recognized qualifications. BUILD has set out 2 years ago. I think it will prove even stronger now as we face and deal with the effects of the corona pandemic. Within the UNEVOC network, it's the European cluster partners that see a special responsibility. They can, and I think they should, contribute to the bridging based on their broad experience and their long-established VET systems. In this short intervention now, I would like to give you an update of the latest developments of TVET from a European perspective, highlighting the recent developments in the EU context. Not only because the Federal Ministry of Education and Research, we have been working in the second semester as the EU presidency, but also because we see big potential in these new documents. I'm sure they will be the guidelines of European TVET in the next years, at least until 2025. Up front, I would like to underline the general consensus that strong TVET is a necessary element of healthy economies all over the world. Technological developments in all sectors demand well-skilled and well-qualified personnel. Vocational professionals are precious resource. Agile, responsive, and responsible TVET systems are a main source of their supply. So nonetheless, the vocational track of qualification has suffered a certain level of systemic negligence over the last decades, and the trend of academization has swept through all our educational systems. For many young men and women, the training in a vocational career seems less promising than an academic career. As a German government, our view is the following. It is that academic and vocational education are different approaches to the world of work. Nonetheless, they are equal in ambition, status, and excellence. Without the cleverness and the creativity of so many thousands of vocational craftsmen and experts, our societies would not work and prosper, not now and not in the future. My first slide, please. Just last week, the European Ministers of Education came together and adopted 3 important documents. First, they agreed on a new Council recommendation of vocational training as part of a broader skills agenda for Europe. Second, they also adopted the Declaration of Osnabrück. This declaration reflects the German ambition to highlight the lifelong learning dimension in VET, the so-called continuous VET or higher VET. It also underlines the necessary participation of social partners, including the interests of companies and the trade unions. And finally, the ministers endorsed the Digital Education Action Plan. I mention these documents because I believe that they will shape the world of vocational training in Europe over the next years. They will also be a landmark contribution of Europe to the global TVET audience. And surely, some of these ideas will become founding stones of the bridging process, which we intend to consolidate. So let me highlight 5 future principles of VET. Next slide, yes. I have to mention these are some quantitative goals of the Council recommendation of VET, and I made a slide just to have you see them, because for the first time we have agreed on these, and they will be the goals of the European VET ministries for the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Let me highlight these 5 principles in VET. I strongly believe in them. First, attractiveness and excellence in content and teaching. There's no way around continuous updating of curricula and the adaptation of the existing professional profiles to the needs of the labor market. Second, we must be front runners in digitalization, adapting to the current trends and using digital opportunities in VET. Let's make this promise a reality now. Third, TVET must contribute to the goals of climate protection. Only if the vast majority of the working population is climate conscious, we will manage the global turnaround in sustainability. Fourth, being the engine of innovation in all relevant economic sectors. Economic and technical innovations are made and they work only in real environments. TVET should highlight this virtue and strengthen its innovative characteristics. And finally, the overdue internationalization of VET. It's a complicated matter, I know, but we have to rise to the levels of international cooperation, which we should have. The EU has now set a target of 8%, and for all VET students. It's an ambitious goal to many member states, and many member states have been complaining about these goals, but no comparison is to the 40% that we have in the academic world. So the next slide, please. You see it. The international experience should be at 8% of all VET students by the year 2025. All right, ladies and gentlemen, innovation cycles are running faster than ever. The corona pandemic seems just another strong example of how sudden our economies and societies are exposed to change. In order to achieve real progress in TVET, we need agile, flexible, and responsive TVET systems. In real terms, we need clever people and clever ideas as well as flexible structures to make TVET breathe with the rhythm of the economy. At the same time, we cannot compromise on the quality of VET education. On the contrary, the policy discussion in the EU is leading to a new definition of excellence in VET. And there's a consensus that vocational training must, of course, provide a holistic education, including transversal and social skills. Now, there's no doubt in my mind the future of VET will be decided on the ground in the various economic sectors. In the end, it will be decided by the main actors themselves. First, the students and their parents. They will opt for the future they desire and they will find most promising. And second, the companies and organizations. They will decide on their recruiting strategies and the human resource development. It's not up to us, the governments, to decide on that. What we can do is setting the foundations right. Dear colleagues, I strongly favor this sectoral approach in VET. Excellent quality of vocational training can best be delivered by those who know the business and know their trade. That's why we also need a strong social partners involvement. Looking forward, we should focus on these future goals. Next slide, please. First, clarity and transparency. Steps into VET and towards a recognized VET qualification must be clear to everyone. Educational pathways should be interconnecting, at least for those who need that flexibility. They should allow growth from initial to continuing VET and even the so-called higher VET, including the EQF levels 5 to 8. Also in need, recognized options to switch between academic and vocational education pathways and vice versa. Second, a level playing field for vocational students. That's very important. Not in all countries, TVET education is free or easily accessible. The funding of VET students must cover all steps towards a recognized qualification. There should be the same funding schemes, scholarships, for the students in the academic world. Third, real attractiveness. The image of TVET must have credible supporters in industry, politics, and society. A big step ahead is the introduction of professional bachelors and professional masters here in Germany. VET should offer precious qualifications and respected titles that are perceived attractive to young people and their families. Experts, bachelors, and masters are a step forward as they are recognized throughout the world. And finally, money, of course, is an issue. The earnings of TVET graduates must reflect their qualification level. At higher levels of VET, the salaries should be comparable to academic degrees. The principle should be equal payment for equal level of qualification. Only then the appropriate social recognition will follow. Dear colleagues, these are strange times. The corona pandemic has left its trace in our societies and our economies, and we don't even know the end of it yet. Bridging our experience becomes more essential than ever, in Europe and beyond. The future of skills and professions is the target of the BUILD project. In so many sectors, the future will look different to what we thought only at the beginning of this year. Clear to me is TVET has to become greener, more digital, and more international. And we need the best ideas on how to achieve this, especially discussing with our partners in Africa and in Asia. The puzzle, let's say the BUILD challenge, lies in the translation of these mentioned principles into real VET environments, meaning schools, dual and work-based learning institutions, companies in production and the service sector, teachers and trainers. The work has just begun. This conference is a cornerstone of the BUILD work. I thank everyone for participating, and I wish you, the BUILD team, all success. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for the information brought to us about the latest trends on TVET from this European perspective. And I think they are due to have an impact on the way TVET is delivered soon, since they cover a mix of short and medium-term initiatives. And to state only one example, the documents mentioned by him tackle issues that are also central to the BUILD project. And I dare to say that's a reason to celebrate the European Union acknowledgement through the documents mentioned by Oliver of how VET providers are well placed to support the twin transition, the transition to a greener and a digital world. Equally important to us, as you will see during the meeting, is the important role to be played by social actors, such as learners or organizations, in the discussions about the development of resilience and excellence through quality, inclusive and flexible VET. So I take this opportunity to express our gratitude to BMBF in the person of Oliver Deer for the sheer level of support and the unconditional commitment to UNESCO-UNEVOC in general and to the BUILD project in particular. Thank you very much, Dr. Deer. And now, after the opening remarks, I invite you to the second point of our agenda. We are moving now to the item of the agenda that will cover the 3 next sessions, when we will dive in the process of identifying, integrating, and implementing new qualifications and competencies. As Oliver said, the task we have posed to ourselves is not a trivial one. And why it's not trivial? As you can see in the diagram now shared with you, the process we are exploring is not a linear one. The system is complex and dynamic. It comprises interlocked dimensions with multiple and diverse and sometimes overlapping stakeholders. The different institutional arrangements in place across the globe also add to the complexity of the theme that we are investigating. And we are aware of this challenge. We were aware of this challenge when we set sail through these uncharted waters of exploring successful practice in Africa, Asia Pacific, and Europe. We knew the hurdles that we would face. But we asked ourselves, how do successful stories look like? How do they answer the questions, the exemplificative questions that you see in the slide? Well, there's no simple answer to that, but I would like to bring some points to your reflection. So how to keep pace with the world of work? How the world of education can keep pace with the world of the work? Providing competencies it demands in a timely manner. And it's just a reflection that is guiding us. Big data, for example, and machine learning have brought challenges for us, of course, but they also have brought a myriad of possibilities. As we speak, algorithms in the 5 largest tech companies in the world are processing 1.2 petabyte of information. I didn't know what was that before preparing for this presentation, but it means more than 1 billion gigabyte of data in a day. And my question is, how is it being used to identify new qualifications and competencies, to inform the world of education? So this is a processing power that could be used to track the competencies that are emerging throughout the world, shortening the lapse between the identification and the actual delivery in workshop, factories, or classrooms, depending on the system. What can be done to improve curricular design in order to make it appealing and attractive? Oliver has touched upon the second question that revolves around that attractiveness of TVET curricula when he mentioned the interconnection between educational pathways. And this is crucial. It's high time we develop pathways with no dead ends, pathways that allow at least the possibility of academic progression. And in this setting, the information that Germany is introducing professional bachelors and masters in its educational system may inspire others in exploring this route. But you can go beyond that. It's imperative that we create curricula that allow for intermediary exit to the labor market, that recognize micro-credentials, that foster lifelong learning. So it's a set of activities we need to develop to increase the attractiveness of TVET. And how to add flexibility to the teaching and learning practice. This is the last point when we are mentioning the implementation of new qualifications and competencies. We have been seeing, in fact, that TVET system have been through a stress test in the last 9 months. And I can say it has not fared worse than other educational sectors, but it has clearly exposed our present limitations. And I will just mention a few. How should TVET deal with the delocalization of the teaching and learning experience? How to teach printing, bricklaying, or welding in an online environment or remotely? It's challenging, isn't it? We need paper, we need bricks, how to do it remotely. So it's a challenge that has been exposed to us. Another one, it's our commitment to capital expenditure in infrastructure. It has become a problem in countries from the north and from the south of the globe, when public resources are channeled to the health sector and social assistance. So the message is that the world of work is quickly evolving, and it's time for us to put in practice concepts that we have been discussing for a long time: flexible learning environments, mobile units, intense use of digitalization. We need all to overcome the current challenge. Of course, all of this is of little value if we do not invest in our main asset. It's ourselves, our human resources. So teachers should be empowered to cope with this new situation through reskilling, upskilling, and lead the journey to the future that we are aiming to. So I will not extend more. This is all from me, these initial insights that I would like to bring to you. And they now will be complemented with additional information collected by UNESCO-UNEVOC and BIBB in the TransMap study that I mentioned before. And it's just worth mentioning it was carried out from March to November 2020, and it covered as a sample the UNEVOC centers in Europe. And for that, for addressing specific trends identified in the TMS or TransMap study, I'm pleased to once again invite my colleague Vera, who will share some of the trends identified in the study. Over to you, Vera.
Thank you, Wilson. Thank you very much. So the trends mapping study is a first step into the theme of new qualifications and competencies, and it's meant as a basis of discussion. We will further explore the theme throughout the year 2021. That will happen mainly with our BUILD expert group on new qualifications and competencies, which is composed of members from Asia Pacific, Africa, and Europe, as Wilson has mentioned earlier. I'd like to emphasize that the main credits for this study go to the UNESCO-UNEVOC consultant Jan-Peter Otero. When conducting this study, our main goal was to gauge the perspective and priorities of European UNEVOC centers on the theme of new qualifications and competencies. And that was done on the basis of a survey and focus groups. The authors deduct 9 trends. These give insights into what priorities European UNEVOC centers see in the theme of new qualifications and competencies. It will be interesting to learn whether you echo these trends from the perspective of your TVET systems or whether you see different priorities. I will now give you insights into selected trends of the TMS which bear upon the theme of our first session, the identification of new qualifications and competencies for relevant sectors and occupations. And to keep things shorter, I'll use the abbreviation NQC instead of new qualifications and competencies from now on. So in our survey, we asked European UNEVOC centers which stakeholders were involved in the identification of NQC and which stakeholders should be more involved. The results show that we mostly remain with the typical circle of stakeholders, such as ministries and national bodies in this context. What we found interesting is that it might be worthwhile to explore how other stakeholders, such as youth organizations, NGOs, or individual experts could be more involved, as it might already be the case in certain systems. This is especially relevant in view of the growing complexity of fields such as digitalization and greening. For example, think of digital natives. They might be best placed to suggest which digital competencies and learning technologies could make TVET an attractive career path. Similarly, NGOs specialized in greening might be best able to assess on a technical basis which green competencies are most relevant for TVET. Let us now have a look at trend 3 of the TMS, which looks into the mix of new competencies that is relevant for the build themes. This trend is based on a list of relevant competencies for the 21st century developed by OECD in 2019. These 21st century competencies are firstly basic competencies such as literacy or numeracy. Secondly, advanced cognitive competencies such as critical thinking or learning to learn. Thirdly, social and emotional competencies such as responsibility or collaboration. And finally, professional and technical competencies meeting the demands of specific occupations. We looked into the 4 build themes: migration, digitalization, entrepreneurship, and greening, and asked the European UNEVOC centers to which extent the OECD competencies are in demand in each of these fields, in each of the build themes. And of course, the competence mix varies between the 4 themes. I'd like to take a closer look, and I will finish with that, at the mix of competencies in the build theme digitalization, to give you one example. Here we see that European UNEVOC centers assess basic digital competencies as absolutely essential in addition to professional and technical competencies. This insight reminds us that when speaking about digitalization, we maybe mostly speak about basic competencies for all professions. Hence, professions ranging from gardeners to nurses need at least such basic competencies in digitalization. The survey results also confirm that we need specialized competencies in digitalization for new, highly specialized occupations. For example, at BIBB, we conducted a large study on which digital competencies we need for metalworking and electrical occupations, such as industrial mechanics. And now we would like to hear from a TVET institution how the identification of NQC is approached in their context. I'm sure you are eager to ask your questions while our next speaker will be speaking, so don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat at the same time, and you will also have a chance to speak after the intervention of our speaker. We're extremely pleased that Mr. Marlon Minja Executive Director at the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, has agreed to present the standards for in-company trainers in ASEAN countries to us. Mr. Minya will tell us how relevant new competencies were identified in the framework of this initiative. A warm welcome, Mr. Minya. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry to this Building Innovation and Learning in Tibet conference, so we can share our experience on the development of new qualifications and competencies in Tibet. In this case, our participation and eventual implementation of the standards for in-company trainers training in ASEAN countries. The standards for in-company trainers in ASEAN countries is actually a regional benchmark for the qualification of in-company trainers. It builds on the German standard for in-company trainers, or the AEVO. It also follows the common scope of standards in the ASEAN region using the concept of competencies. It is rather short and simple to be made adaptable to the different economic and educational systems of all ASEAN member states. It can also be applied to in-company trainers in all technical and vocational fields. Hence, we have made it in such a way that it will not be occupation specific. Okay, let's go into the development of the standard. Way back, also a project then in the Mekong region called the BB Mekong Project, which started and initiated the process of establishing this particular standard for in-company trainers training. During that time, only limited to the Mekong region. However, there is also a parallel project in the Philippines back then called the K-12 Plus project, and it is to the benefit of the Philippines during that time to also participate in this BB Mekong project, because during that time the Philippines also does not have that standard for in-company trainers training. What we have existing back then is a standard for Tibet teachers, or those teachers that teach in Tibet institutions, but not for those trainers that actually practice their craft in the companies. Therefore, when the Philippines participated, the level of ambition also went higher. So from the Mekong region, it also evolved into the to be a standard for the ASEAN countries. Therefore, the project back then invited 60 experts from the Mekong region, composed of Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, and then Thailand in the Philippines participated using a bottom-up approach of building up these standards. So there were 4 consecutive workshops done, September, October, and November of 2014, and the last one is a February 2015 workshop, wherein representatives of national stakeholders agreed unanimously to the content of the standard in February 2015. These particular workshops that I have mentioned were facilitated by the Federal Institute for Vocational Education and Training, or the BIVB. Some participants from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology also were there, and then GIZ also hired some short-term experts to help in the development. Okay, in a very short description, the standard for in-company trainers in ASEAN countries is an 80-hour, 4-module standard, wherein 4 main areas of action of in-company trainers were identified by the 60 experts back then. They were arranged into 4 modules, which you can see in your screen. This is module 1 is analyzing work task and defining learning requirements. Module 2 is about planning and preparing training. Module 3 is conducting training. And module 4 is on the evaluation and further development of the training. Each module, as you will see in the succeeding slides, will contain 3 to 5 competencies, and the modules and competencies are related to each other, and they follow a logical order, very much like that of the German standard. here is an example. For example, if you look into module 1, you will see that the company trainer will be able to carry out workplace analysis, identify relevant work tasks, and define learning requirements if they undergo this particular module. The next slide will also show you an example of how it was written. So it also gives you the requisite skills, knowledge, and the particular contents and topics that form those skills and knowledge required to be able to do the competency. Next slide. Okay, what we have also done is to conduct master trainers training so that our master trainers will serve as multipliers. We have developed in the process a 120 hours master trainers training course, which will help produce the in-company trainers who will be subjected to 80 hours in-company trainers training course. And then these trained in-company trainers training will now be the ones to be our ambassadors and really perform the training in their respective companies and with their respective employees. Okay, because also in order to take into consideration the important developments and, for example, the advancements of technology and all other important things that will need to be considered in the development and later revision of the standard. The standard that we have developed also underwent significant revision, and a set of proposed revisions were done by a technical working group, and it was adopted by a steering committee in August of 2018. And some of the highlights of the revisions were just that there's no change in the structure, in the format of the standard. There's also no change in the order of competency in order to comply with Bloom's taxonomy. What is done is that it was organized in a chronological order instead. There were also some rewordings that were done on the skills and the knowledge part to ensure that they can be assessed, which is very important. We have also reduced duplication in the content, and we have ensured that the correlation of skills and contents and topics will be done. And there's also made some clarifications on what are the skills, knowledge, and what are the contents topics inside the modules. Okay, we have also developed the assessment criteria for these particular standards. The in-company trainer is being assessed based on criteria of being able to teach, which is the micro-teaching part. So this will involve preparing the lesson plan, introducing the lesson, delivering the information, and concluding the lesson. There will also be some criteria on personality, which will be an evaluation of the master trainer's performance. And of course, the ability to design training, which is in the form of a training portfolio that the participant has to develop. In the next slide, you will see that the assessors were very strict in terms of the assessors. We have made it a standard that there will be 2 to 3 assessors per training. The trainers of the company of the participants of the company training cannot be the assessors. And then we have also set forth criteria, which you will anyway see in the link that I will provide later. Okay, next slide. Okay, this particular slide just tells you the current progress as to the number of master trainers and in-company trainers trained in the ASEAN country. So if you will see, the most number of trainings were done in Thailand in terms of in-company training, followed by Indonesia also has done a lot already in terms of in-company trainers training, together with the Philippines and Myanmar has also done significant work in terms of in-company training. Okay. Just to summarize what I have discussed, and also to point out to the important lessons that we have learned in this particular undertaking, which lasted almost 3 4 years, and then of course in the implementation of the standards in the Philippines, it also took us another 3 years to do it. Okay, now after hearing the descriptions and the relevant information about the standard, let me now summarize the points that I want to share to the body, which is on the development of the standards. The development of the standards was based on the need of the ASEAN member states for a standardized baseline for in-company trainers' competencies, which can lead to the better cohesion of existing education standards and work demands of the industry. In this development process, it is important to point out the role of the stakeholders that contributed to the process. You can, as you have heard and seen, both the public and the private sector were represented in the 60 experts that developed the standards. And it is very important to note that we have used a bottom-up approach in the development process. The fact also that they are already together in the beginning of the process contributes to the success of the development and implementation of the standards. It has also made it easier at the ASEAN level or the regional level to secure the necessary endorsements, because the same officials who developed it were the ones also that were sitting in the ASEAN Education and Labor Ministry meetings. Therefore, the collaboration process worked just fine because of the, as I've said, the common need of these ASEAN member states to really standardize the baseline of their respective in-company trainers, because it also goes in parallel with the goal of the ASEAN to really go into more mutual recognition agreements and goes line in line, of course, with the development of the ASEAN qualification referencing framework, which is very much being done at the TVET level and soon in the higher education and the basic education level. Okay, it is also important to point out that although the ASEAN member states during the development process have diverging national demands and regulations, the fact that both the private and the public sector were already there in the beginning of the process made it possible to hurdle whatever the challenges posed by the development process. The mix of competencies that were integrated in the initiative and in the training included lots of compromises that were done among the participants on what would be the definitions, how would you operationalize concepts, how would you do the training, for example, what were already the existing standards among the member countries, what are the international best practices that can be tapped, for example, as were introduced by BIBB, as were given by the GIZ and the other invited participants to contribute also in the development process. The participants believe then that those things would be the best to encapsulate the particular module. So as you can see, it took a lot of time. It started 2013 and it was approved 2015 because compromises have to be made and international best practices, existing standards have to be considered in the development process. And as you have seen in the particular slide I've shown earlier, so far Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines have already promulgated their own localized standards based on the regional benchmark that we have developed, while the others are in the process of coming up with their own regulations in order to fit the standards in their particular TVET national standards. Okay, I think that ends my presentation, but as the slide will show, the work still continues, and we are really hoping that we could work more with Germany, for example, in really further ensuring that the process continues, and that there's always a need for continuous human resources development. If you want to know more about the standards, you can visit the website c-vet.net, which is actually the repository of all information related to TVET in Southeast Asia. So you just need to register, and you can get a lot of resources from that particular platform. And if you have questions, which I will not be able to answer in the open forum later, you can always email pcchdf@philippinechamber.com. Okay, thank you very much for giving me the time, and I'm really looking forward to your questions, which I hope I can give answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mina, for this comprehensive presentation of the IGN standards. And it's really something to celebrate, something memorable. The balance that has been found between standards and the customization to different countries, to different perspectives and settings. Also, the cascade model that you presented show a lot of potential to reach out to large countries or large populations, such as the one in some of the Asian countries. I'm glad to hear, I already was informed that we have a few questions from the audience to Mr. Mina. He is available in the chat for you. And now I pass the floor to my colleague Natalie once again, who will explore some of these questions, comments, and remarks with you. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Wilson. Yeah, so I see that you have been very busy. That's the advantage of having a pre-recorded presentation. You have been answering most questions in the chat already. That's great. Nonetheless, I don't want to take the chance for people to ask additional questions. Is there anyone who would like to speak and ask their questions live? I don't see any raised hands right now, but just to give you the opportunity. Not right now. Okay, so I will move back actually to some of the questions from the chat. I'm not sure that was answered yet. One of them was whether small and medium enterprises are also getting on board. Is specific support needed to enable in-company trainers at SMEs to meet these standards? Maybe you can briefly comment on that, Mr. Minya.
Thank you, Natalie. Can you hear me very well? Okay.
It's very well.
Thank you for the question. Actually, that was an interesting question, because when we started developing the standards together with the other 59 experts back then, the foremost that we had in mind is that the standard should really give priority to our small and medium enterprises, because we believe back then, and even up until now, that the small and medium enterprises are the ones that really need the help for these particular standards, because they do not have the particular system. They don't have, for example, training centers that can dedicate, let's say, that can really be the place where they do their exclusive trainings. What happens most of the times in these small and medium enterprises is that their HR, sometimes the HR serves as the company trainer. And when we all know that these are two different job functions. Sometimes also it happens in some of the small and medium enterprises, at least in the experience of the Philippines and in the other parts of the Mekong region, that the owner themselves are the ones doing the training. So, and what's worse is that they themselves implement the training, not basing it on a particular standards. They do it based on, let's say, how they run it in the past. They base it on how they learned, let's say, from their colleagues. And sometimes you cannot do this because there are also things that do not apply necessarily when you apply it to a particular setting. That therefore the beauty of the standards is that it tries to give you a baseline. Of course, it does not dictate you that this should be the case, but rather you can start from this. You can add depending on the success factors that you will later find out from your implementation and from your experience.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I imagine it's quite challenging, and therefore the standards are a very valuable support to improve things. So yeah, I think with this, I would already move on to our next agenda item. As Mr. Minya mentioned already, he's here to answer further questions in the meeting chat and also in the TVET forum later on. Thank you very much for that. I will repost the links to the forum as well later on. So we invite you to continue the discussion there. Thanks a lot, Mr. Minya. And I'm handing back to Vera to introduce the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Having learned about a first example related to the identification of NQC, now let's move to our second session, the integration of new qualifications and competencies into curriculum and training regulations. And let's have a look at selected trends of the TMS related to this second part. In the second part, we explore the relevance of 4 different strategies to the integration of new qualifications and competencies in curricula and training regulations. European UNEVOC centers had identified these 4 strategies in the first phase of the BID project. And Michael Wiechert had mentioned them in his welcoming remarks, and now I'd like to draw your attention to them a second time. Firstly, the cross-cutting strategy, referring to transversal competencies relevant to all learners. These competencies are therefore integrated in all curricula and training regulations of a TVET system. An example are basic digital competencies relevant for all. Secondly, the occupational approach, referring to competencies relevant for one specific occupation. Hence, with this approach, competencies are integrated in occupation-based curricula and training regulations. For example, you might want to update one occupation with new competencies. Thirdly, the sector-specific approach, referring to competencies relevant for curricula and training regulations of one economic sector, such as the construction sector. For example, you might integrate green competencies for the whole logistics sector. And finally, the modular approach, referring to additional qualification modules that complement initial and continuing training and allow for a quicker response to new developments. For example, you may propose an additional module on sustainability that TVET trainees or employees can choose to complete if it is relevant to them. In our survey, we asked European UNEVOC centers which of these strategies are most relevant in their TVET system and whether they use a strategy with which the BID project has not acknowledged so far. And the results show that European UNEVOC centers recognize the occupational and the cross-cutting approaches as the most important strategies for integrating NQC. Well, possibly these approaches were rated highest simply because they are the best known. It might thus be useful to further explore the 4 strategies and see how the sectoral and additional approaches can complement well-proven strategies. We have heard about a need for flexible and agile making and updating of occupations earlier today. New strategies for the integration of NQC might be helpful in this endeavor. It might be important to explore the benefits of such new strategies as compared to traditional ones. The 4 strategies identified by the BID project are not meant as an exhaustive list. In Trend 6 of the TMS, we see that European UNEVOC centers proposed additional strategies. One strategy mentioned was the local specific approach, where NQC would be integrated and tested on a local level, and when a pilot phase is successful, the NQC would be brought from the local to a national level. We would now like to hear from a TVET institution how the integration of NQC in curricula and training regulations is approached in their context. Let me cordially welcome Mr. Johannes Lindner, head of the Impulszentrum für Entrepreneurship of the Austrian Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research, and head of the Initiative for Teaching Entrepreneurship, or IFTE for short. Mr. Lindner will present the program Youth Start Entrepreneurial Challenges to us and how the issue of integrating NQC in curricula and training regulations was tackled with this initiative. This example is already documented as a European build innovation and learning practice on our BID website. It has been collected during the first phase of the BUILD project in 2019. So please don't hesitate to explore this and other successful examples, as well as supplementary material on our website. Also, please note that you're welcome to propose an example from your institution in one of the BUILD theme as a BUILD innovation and learning practice at any time. Now, please, Mr. Lindner, we are very much looking forward to hearing about your example.
Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to talk about our experiences and to share it with you shortly and compact. I will speak about 5 points. The first one is the context. I'm coming from a country which has 80% of the country mountains. At the moment, we have 3 meters new mountain snow. There's a lot of snow in my country. And 80% of our youngsters in the age group between 15 up to 19 are in a TVET training. It's a very high percentage. What does it mean when you have 80% of the youngsters in the TVET training? It means also that you have a lot of diverse education system, and our education system includes 500 different syllabuses and 480 for TVET, just to have an understanding about the complexity when you want to integrate this in the TVET system. The second point, which I like to mention, is what does it mean? Entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial learning, and entrepreneurial competences. For us, entrepreneurship is a mindset, it's a process-oriented knowledge, and it's a lot about methods, and it's including these elements. It's a potential-oriented focus. Our youngsters should learn to see opportunities, to develop new ideas for that, to identify and avoid risk, and to learn a lot of entrepreneurial skills. But the most important is to put ideas in action. It means that they are really doing something. We have our own reference frame for entrepreneurship competences, which includes developing ideas, implementing ideas, and a lot of sustainable oriented thinking. It's in context to the EntreComp, the Youth Start Entrepreneurial Challenge reference frame was developed a bit earlier. Our understanding of entrepreneurial education means that there is a core element of entrepreneurial education. Core means that each youngster is able to create ideas and to bring them in action. There's a second level, which means empowerment, and there's a third level, which means responsibility against the society, solidarity, that ideas are also used to develop the society. Oops. Okay. The third point is, which kind of learning strategy do we use? And we are using entrepreneurial challenge-based learning, which means that we have small and larger challenges in these 3 levels to support entrepreneurial learning. And it's not an island element. It should be done over several years that the people are really able to develop this. You see, we have covered this kind of challenges from the idea challenge up to the community challenge in the different levels and the different intensity. Good. It is for youngsters that the program was developed in cooperation with some other ministries. It was developed with the ministry from Luxembourg, from Slovenia and Portugal, and of course, Austria. You find it also in Spanish and in several other languages because there's a bilateral cooperation going on. And we are also organizing some festivals together. We also have developed games like the newest game, The Next Generation of Changemaker. The fourth point, bridges, I call these bridges, is development of entrepreneurial competences, especially the entrepreneurial mindset, should start early. So we are not starting with entrepreneurship with the TVET. We started some years earlier. We start with 6 years. And here you see some youngsters in one of the challenges which are fit to this age group. And here you have an overview for this age group. Now I'd like to come to the core aspect of the integration of entrepreneurial education. And I see there are existing different phases how you can integrate this in your education system, in your TVET institution and TVET education system. there's a pioneer phase. It's always a question how you start. Is it a bottom-up start? Is it a top-down start? When you start bottom-up, it means you have a different interpretation of the existing syllabus. It's very individual oriented. When you have a top-down, you are doing a pilot at some TVET institution to collect experiences. In our case, we immediately had some institutional support, and we started immediately with exchange of international partners and with the stakeholders, of course. There's a second stage, which I call now concept phase. On institutional level, is that institution take over the experiences from some other TVET institution and try to develop in the ecosystem a concept, how to implement entrepreneurial learning. And there are different curricular dimensions how you can do this. In our case, we made a large field trial with a large number of TVET institutions. We implemented entrepreneurship educators, coordinators in all of our federal states who are coordinating teacher groups and stakeholder groups. We're organizing a Youth Start Festival and curriculum work. We have changed over the years, and we are now working 20 years, 3 times the syllabus, and developed it more and more and integrated it more and more. Enlargement phase. It's like on institutional level is that you really have a concept, you have it consolidated, and you develop it in practice. On education level, the syllabus is integrating entrepreneurship. We have also developed an entrepreneurship school approach with a certification process. And there is a large number of schools in my country now certified. We have a Youth Start International Festival because integration of entrepreneurship in celebration is important. We can learn a lot from sport, how they are doing this. And then we have a quality securities phase, which means that it's running well on the institutional level. On the education system level, we have a national action plan for entrepreneurship. Our national action plan for entrepreneurship means we have, it was just presented the next phase of action plan between 2020 up to 2025. And we have 4 aspects. The one is, how can we make entrepreneurship more popular in the society and can also get in touch with people who do not know it? Which framework conditions do we need to change? There were some legal aspects in the syllabus, in some aspects, and so on. Then the learning elements, because we see that's not an island, we need several stations, how you can implement it. When we have several years of TVET training, we need to do this on regular basis, in a compulsory part and in an electable part. And we also have chosen some security process quality aspects. Yeah, 5 minutes are over. This is a short introduction in the system. And now I'm open for questions. I hope this was short enough, and but still it was a compact possibility to share experiences.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindner. It was short, but also very informative, your presentation. And I think it ratifies what we have been discussing, that the process of integrating new qualifications and competencies, and in this case, entrepreneurship, it involves like a multi-dimensional aspect. So you see in our previous slide, you have the actions on communication, on advocacy, technical actions to implement it properly. So it involves a vast array of stakeholders in the development and the integration of new qualifications and competencies. So I see our chat is already blossoming, a lot of questions. I will give the floor once again to my colleague Natalie, who will share with you some of these questions. And please, just a reminder, feel free to ask questions live with your camera on. Just raise your hands and you'll be given a place to ask questions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson. And thanks a lot, Mr. Lindner, for the presentation. It's a pity you jumped over some of those slides so fast. It was really interesting. But I would like to give the floor to Emmanuel Ozinem, who raised his hand to pose a question. Please, Emmanuel. And you need to unmute yourself.
My name is Emmanuel Osinen from University of Nigeria. My question was to Mina. I raised question when Mina was addressing his issue. Incidentally, I was skipped, so I don't know whether I can still get back to him for the question. Hello? So can I said my question was to be directed to Mina.
To the previous presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I apologize. I did not see if you had raised your hand earlier. So let's take.
Okay. Let me first thank Mina for that wonderful presentation. In the course of his presentation, we observed that quite a number of Asian countries participated in the project because it was a regional, trying to develop a regional standard. But at the end of it, only very few countries actually began to implement the standard. So the question is, was it that there was no sufficient commitment by national countries at the beginning and during the standard development of the standards? What could be the reason for low number of countries that began to implement the standard? That's my question.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir, for the question. That's very loud and clear. Okay. We also have to consider the various levels of development of the ASEAN countries that did it. For example, if you go into some parts of the Mekong region where it was originally aimed towards the development of that standard, most of them do not even understand what is competency-based. Some of them do not have yet the existing frameworks or laws that will enable, for example, the recognition of in-company trainers as in their particular qualification or their referencing frameworks. So it will be also a difficult challenge for them to right away implement the standards from the ASEAN, the ones that we have developed, into immediate implementation. They also have to work out, for example, on their existing framework. They have to make sure that at least it conforms to competency-based, because the standards that were developed were also competency-based. The ones that were successfully being able to do it, for example, Malaysia, they already have these existing frameworks, and in fact, they even already have recognizing company trainers. So the adjustment was very easy for them. While for the others, it also takes some time. We have friends here from Myanmar, and I'm sure they understand what I'm saying. The standards try to really go into some sort of a compromise onto what at least what the baseline will look like, and how each individual ASEAN member states can also do to implement it. So yeah, it's not that they do not have the commitment, but they don't have the necessary infrastructure or frameworks existing yet, and they have to start from that also before they go into the eventual implementation of the standards. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. So thank you both. And thank you, Mr. Lindner, for allowing this step backwards in the agenda, so to say. So I have a question which is actually directed towards Mr. Lindner. Whether you could share more detailed documentation on the Youth Start experience. I'm sure you have plenty of materials ready. Graduating companies and launching startups is one of the strategic pillars from my TVET institution, and we are keen to learn from mature experiences like Youth Start. So maybe you can comment a bit on the resources that are available. You are still muted.
Of course, we can share much more details about that. The user program is going back to an experience which started 2000. We made a large pilot project on a single TVET institution, on a medium large institution, to find out which kind of methods, which kind of entrepreneurial learning aspects are important and how many trainers should be involved. Because we have the fixed opinion that it's not just one or two trainers who should be involved, and it's not just some subjects who should be involved. We wanted to share a different way of learning, and that's the challenge-based learning. And this fits to several different learning areas. Therefore, it is transversal. Still, it is transversal, and we also involve language teachers, or we involved, maybe I share this once more with you, just to see this. We have also some areas which are totally entrepreneurship, because we have the clear ambition that some activities should be done very, very student-oriented. And here you have this overview of the You Start entrepreneurial challenges, and you see there's existing idea challenge, hero challenge, my personal challenges, different challenges which you can make in different combinations. We have so many different TVET syllabuses, therefore we need a very flexible system. The empowerment challenges we have integrated also in total different areas, which not automatically you would say that's entrepreneurship, but it's important that you have an overview and you see the connection between it. So we have a portfolio for the learners that they can see the different subject areas and the different teachers who are trainers who are involved in that. That's the combination. In the field research, for us, it was a randomized field research. We had 30,000 youngsters inside, and we, in fact, made 3 programs. We made a short program, a medium-large program, and a large program of entrepreneurial learning to see how intensive should be entrepreneurial learning. We find out all of them were working. The long version was working best. For us, it was very important to see that we are not only increasing skills knowledge, we wanted also to increase entrepreneurial mindset. And this was also possible with the short version, which is not something easy to do it. How can we call this? It's self-efficacy, it's motivation, and it's also to see the positive perspective that TVET is in that way changing the perspectives for your future life, because you know by yourself how you maybe can go on with that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Anyone who would like to speak up? No? We have actually one short question maybe that Vera can comment on, going back to the TMS. Sorry. There's another question in the chat. Sorry. Handling too many windows at the same time. Okay. Yeah, interesting question. So, Mr. Lindner, can this challenge-based learning be an alternative or complementary to work-based learning? How do the two go together?
I think it's in both aspects. It's possible. The challenge-based learning, it's an approach where you say, okay, I do not want to show one by one how this how a training should go on. For instance, you want that someone is learning to repair refrigerators. you can organize this as a challenge that he has to find out how can I cool a product in a sustainable way. Or you do it on the other way, that you give it one-to-one and explain it detailedly. In the labor market, it would be like that you will have challenges and you have to find a solution for that. So it's really very, very comparable to work-oriented learning. But I also have the opinion that it's important that you add a couple of extra elements, because the entrepreneurial competences includes a couple of competences which normally do not take attention or not enough attention in work-oriented learning, like an entrepreneurial design thinking and so on, or storytelling, or responsibility for the community. We are using debating challenges because we see that it's important that our learners are able to argue why this solution is the best one. Yeah, I hope this is an answer for the question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's very, very interesting and inspiring. So I hope I did not miss anyone else. I think there's nothing in the chat I have overlooked, no raised hands. So with this, I will hand back to Vera for...
Maybe I say a last sentence. You have still
Sure.
the possibility in this discussion round that you get in touch
Yes.
with me. And I will also share in the chat the presentation where you find my contact data. Feel free to get in contact.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. And that's a good reminder. We will also share the overall slide deck with all the presentations included on the meeting webpage after this meeting. So you have the opportunity to look at the content and get in touch with the people who presented here. Okay. Thank you very much. And giving back to Vera.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you also, Mr. Linden. I think this is a very interesting example, especially because the material you produce is available in English to everyone online. That I think is very valuable for everyone. We will now move to the third session of today's conference, which concerns the implementation of NQC in teaching and training. And to start the session, I'd like to give you insights into trends which are related to this third part of the trends mapping study. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to trend 7 of the TMS. This concerns innovative teaching and training methods and technologies in view of NQC. And by the way, let me say I have noted that there were questions related to the TMS in the chat, in the Zoom chat. And we'll collect these questions and we'll be happy to also answer these questions on the TVET forum online after the conference. So they won't get lost, but we'll be happy to discuss with you further on that. Now, going back to trend 7 of the TMS, we revealed a growing interest of the participating European UNEVOC centers in exploring methods and technologies for the practical implementation of NQC. And in this context, European UNEVOC centers assessed the learner-centered approach as extremely useful. Examples for this learner-centered approach included, for example, the development of entrepreneurial competencies using simulated scenarios. European UNEVOC centers observe that such practices improve students' interest and motivation significantly. Digital platforms and technologies also have a great potential to improve teaching and training. However, it is important to underline that such modern technologies are not always available and can be cost-intense. Thus, while they are certainly helpful to achieve a greater level of TVET attractiveness and quality, the implementation of NQC does not and should not rely on such technologies. What I believe is interesting about this trend is that European UNEVOC centers are seemingly open to new methods and technologies on a broad scale. It does not seem to be a marginal phenomenon, but something that many among us are interested in and are willing to use in their system. E-learning might have been a niche business in TVET before 2020, but is now en vogue. It might thus be important to explore how such methods and technologies can be implemented on a large scale. Now let's move to the final trend of the TMS that I would like to share with you today. And this trend suggests that the roles and self-understanding of TVET teachers and trainers is changing. This is a discussion that has been very prominent during our BUILD workshops with European UNEVOC centers in the second half of 2019. Traditionally, TVET teachers and trainers may have been perceived solely as transmitters of technical knowledge, and now teachers and trainers may become more like tutors or mentors. They must support students and trainees in their personal development. Consequently, as teachers and trainers are confronted with new requirements and need to understand and convey NQC, they must be trained accordingly in their initial and continuous training. We would now like to hear from a TVET institution how the implementation of NQC is approached in their context. We're very happy to welcome Ms. Ida Carrillo Alvarinho from the National Authority of Professional Education, or ANEP, in Mozambique to our conference. She will present a project on the reform of TVET in Mozambique and how it helped to implement NQC in teaching and training. Thank you, Ida. Please take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. May I start? Okay.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I'm going to share our experience in Mozambique. As you know, Mozambique is an African country on the southern region of Africa. My focus will be on implementing of qualifications, but for contextualizing it, I will summarize our process in identifying and designing new qualifications and competencies. Next slide, please. So these are the points. You can pass to the next slide. So only for saying, I think it's also for, I think we can answer the question that was put by Emmanuel. For implementing the new system, we had a very important legal heads in our country.
Ida, you are muted.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Now
very
you're
much.
back.
I was saying that in Mozambique, I'm going to share our experience in Mozambique. Our country, we are implementing a deep reform on TVET because our former system was not aligned to the demands of the labor market, was not flexible. It had not a national coherence. And for example, the curriculum was more based on subjects and not in competencies. It was more close to general studies than to technical studies. So we are very happy because we have a law. It was approved by our parliament, a law for professional education, this law. And under this law, it was created ANEP. ANEP, it's National Authority of Education. I belong to this authority. And we have now a decree about the licensing of the institutions, for the professional education institutions. We can pass this slide. Please, okay. So this law, the main innovations that was the establishment of this regulatory body, ANEP. It's really, we didn't have any regulatory body for this. And with this body, ANEP regulates the private sector, but also the public sector. Now we are implementing a national system for professional qualifications for the first time. We have our national professional qualifications framework at this moment, and we have a national catalog of professional qualifications and competencies. And we established also a national fund for professional education for financing the training activities. And for this fund, the state will contribute, but will contribute to this fund. And now we have the possibility for doing a partnership between public and private sector. It was not like this in former system. The next slide, please. As I have said, we have a national catalog of professional qualifications. And at this moment, we have in this catalog 139 qualifications and also some independent modules. And in these different areas that you can see here. Before this reform, for example, training on tourism and hospitality, there was not this kind of training in Mozambique and in other areas. Now we have all these areas, and the certification of graduates of these qualifications is carried out by ANEP. Before the reform, the different institutions issued the certificates, but we didn't have any criteria for establishing the value of these different certificates. So now it's carried out by ANEP. Please, and the next slide. Only a few words. Once more, you have to click once more. There is a picture. Once more, please click. Once more, yeah. Okay, only a few words for telling you, sharing with you, how do you identify and develop the qualifications for assuring the relevance and quality of them. So we create for each area, we have a consultative committee, we call the Sectorial Advisor Committee, in Portuguese is Comitê Técnico Setorial. And these committees are composed by the main employers in Mozambique related to each area. At this moment, we work with 20 stacks for discussing with them the occupations and the competencies under each occupation. We have also the teams or after the consulting near the stacks. After this, we have a team, a technical team who writes the qualification with all the details. And at the end, we have the validation panel. This validation panel are composed by people who we know that normally they are teachers at the universities, but also people who work a long time ago at the industry and know everything about this area, the occupations and the competencies. When all these people are, they agree with the design of the qualifications, it's approved by ANEP, it goes to our catalog and is published in our government magazine. Only some words for speaking about the qualifications. We have in all of them, we have modules we call generic competencies on literacy, numeracy, life skills, basic digital skills, and English also. As you know, in Mozambique, our national language is English, and we have to learn English because for working at that companies, we need it. And we have also vocational or professional competencies. So we can pass the slide. Please, the next slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to speak really about my subject is implementation of, the previous slide, please. No, the previous one. Yeah. Okay, for implementation, by decree, I referred to this decree at the beginning of my presentation. Every institution, IEP, it's Instituição de Educação Professional Education institution, must be accredited by ANEP. And accreditation is a component of quality assurance system. And this accreditation is subject to these requirements: the physical space, the infrastructures, including workshops, laboratories, etc. You know, our schools we have lots of problems in our schools, and for having a workshop, for example, is very difficult, even for having a desk and a chair for the students. So now they must have all these things. Modern equipment, it's according to the qualification, of course. And we have requirements about the trainers or teachers and about managers. Next slide, please. Sorry, I lost the internet. Now I am here back again.
Great. Okay.
So in every qualification is indicated the requirements for this accreditation. Of course, this accreditation is done by technical area and must be renewed after every 5 years. We can understand this. So next slide. For trainers, the decree states that for trainers who teach the levels 3, 4, and 5 of our nation, they must hold level and the respective technical area, and they must hold also what we call certificate B. It's a certificate about 700 hours in methodology, mainly in CBT, competence-based training methodology. And for the trainers who teach the levels 1 and 2, we have these requirements. And certificate C and certificate B are very similar. And for the managers, they must hold a higher education level and what we call certificate A. You know, in our country, a hard issue, a big problem difficulty is related with the management of our schools, of our institutions. So it's why now we have requirements for the managers. The next slide, please. What we have carried out in our public institutions under the reform of professional education, we had some actions in our infrastructures and equipment, as you can see in the slide. The main problem was workshops, laboratories, and the equipment. And also we have introduced the safeguards, environmental safeguards. For in-job trainers, we have at this moment about 4,000 teachers or trainers in our institutions. So we could not stop the system and to send them to complete the certificate B or A or something and to turn. So we had to organize some initiatives so that we don't stop the system, but at the same time we make sure that the teachers have the profile, the established profile. So we approved the strategy for trainers training. We still have ad hoc training in technical skills. For example, some trainers, they don't know how to manage the new equipment, so they must be trained in this. But while they are teaching, so they have to do at the same time. And also we have done ad hoc training in competence-based. So in one hand we have the technical skills for the trainers, and in the other hand the skills on competence-based training. But at the same time we are having groups who attend the complete certificate B. So we are doing 2 or 3 things at the same time. So we used to say that we have to change some tools in our car while the car while we are driving the car. At the same, we cannot stop the car and to change some equipment. So it's what we are doing at this moment. A significant number of teachers, they have already done the certificates and their courses at the university. But to change the minds, to change the attitude, how to teach in a new way, it's still difficult, but of course we are improving the situation. So only for summarizing, we have for implementing the qualification, we have the law, we have the accreditation of the institutions, we have actions related to physical infrastructures and equipment and all the space, physical space, and we have interventions on the teachers or trainers. I think it's all. Next slide. Click again. You can click. So this, okay. The business sector participates in this process on the board of directors of ANEP. They belong to the board. The board is composed by nine people, and 5 come from private sector. They participate at National Fund for Professional Education, at the sectoral technical committees, TACs, as I referred, the qualification validation panels, the external verification of the evaluation of the trainees. We have this external verification. It's not, we don't leave it only on the hands of the teachers. And also they participate in these committees, management committees of the schools and institutions, and in others. And I think it's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Ida, for your presentation to us. I personally thank you and say that I'm proud to have ANEP here with us today, an institution that I witnessed when it was born in 2017, and I can see you have made a lot of progress since that time. And I would dare to say you have become a benchmark for Eastern Africa in relation to TVET. So thank you very much for your participation. And I once again pass the floor to my colleague, Natalie, who will bring the participation from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the presentation, also from me. So we have a question in the chat, which is from Nuria Lopez, representing an NGO, Eki Foundation, which is specialized in solar photovoltaic installations in sub-Saharan countries. And they are involved in TVET development, for example, in Liberia, with very weak TVET structure and institutions. And as we heard earlier from Vera, from the transmapping study, NGOs might be one of the stakeholders to be more involved in the development of TVET. So is there any experience in that regard, how NGOs have been or can be involved in the future? Are you still with us, Ida? You have to unmute yourself.
I lost the
Yes.
sound.
Now you are back.
I lost the sound. I was to listen you. May I ask you?
The question was about the role of NGOs. There was a message in the chat from someone representing an NGO and wondering if and how they can be involved in the development and implementation of TVET. Do you have any experience?
Of course, we can cooperate. We have our. I didn't write in presentation our website, but we have www.anep.gov.mz. But I can write here, and so people can visit our website, and even if you want, you can send me an email and how to quit. I'm going to write.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think there was a audio problem, but I think we got the message. And once again, let me just refer to the TVET forum for the continuing discussion of our different topics. Okay, so just taking one more look at the chat, or is there anyone who would like to speak, ask a further question? No.
Yes, can I speak?
Yes, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I am Anizio Matangala, and I work at ANEP with Dr. Ida. So I just wanted to add a little bit on the answer that she has just gave for the participation of NGOs. Yes, there is room for NGOs to participate in the whole process. I mean, we have NGOs making proposals of qualifications to be introduced, and when those qualifications are reviewed by our technical staff, are submitted to the board of ANEP for approval. So, like any other entity or organization that is willing to contribute for qualifications development process, NGOs are also welcome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this addition and explanation. Okay, are there any other questions or comments right now to our example from Mozambique? No, okay, thanks a lot. So we are nearing the end of our event already. It was a brief but intense 2 hours, I think. And I would like to take the opportunity once again to thank all of those who contributed, who presented their examples today. It was very interesting and a pleasure to see what is happening around the globe. and also to see how much interest this topic generates. It's very nice to see this. So with this, I would like to already hand over to the reflections. So towards the last agenda item on our agenda. And I would give the floor to Ms. Kelly Shiohira, who represents JET Education Services from South Africa. And yeah, she will make some reflecting remarks on this session and the topic. So Kelly, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any slides, so I'm just going to speak to the topic. And I think actually, I'm very glad to come in now because I'm from JET Education Services, which is an NGO, think tank, do tank, and also a UNEVOC center in South Africa. So if I position JET within the framework we were given today, we operate at the meso level as a research and support organization. So we work with governments and individual institutions. And I would just like to take this opportunity to raise some challenges and opportunities in the African context around the discussions that we've had today, and speak a little bit about how JET is contributing as an NGO. So the situation in Africa, I think many people will know, is a little bit different to other contexts. What is very clear is that TVET is now and will be even more critical in the future. Even before COVID-19, the world was facing this unprecedented challenge of displaced persons. And in Africa, we have a youth bulge, which is reaching working age now. And the jobs and economies to absorb them are not necessarily in place in many countries. And entrepreneurship is often looked to as part of the solution. But despite a robust entrepreneurial spirit among South African youth, a vanishingly small percentage of startup companies succeed to grow beyond 5 staff members. So we see this situation worldwide where careers are increasingly non-linear and transitions into the workforce, especially in Africa, are highly recursive with iterative cycles between training and work. And it's not unique to developing contexts. Even myself, if you look far enough back in my CV, you will find that I was a horse trainer for 7 years before going into education. So we don't have this kind of corporate ladder anymore. It's more of a corporate lattice where we move between different fields and within different fields acquire new skill sets as we go along. There's been significant progress in Africa, however, through initiatives such as the African Continental Qualifications Framework. This is an initiative to try and make credentials transparent and recognized across borders, across regions and continents. And you'll see that within South Africa even, things are moving in the TVET sector. One of the major challenges is fragmented and inconsistent treatment of qualifications, as was brought up here. Some are funded, some are not. There's inconsistent use of terminology even, and there's a need to improve efficiency and effectiveness in parts of the system. Right now in South Africa, you find the Department of Education undergoing a huge shift. They're incorporating an exit certificate at grade 9 level and moving into 3 streams for secondary school, essentially an academic pathway, technical and vocational, and what they call a technical occupational pathway. This is a major shift for the education system, which has important implications for TVET and I think emphasizes the importance of TVET and occupational training pathways. But there are questions about the ability of institutions to absorb youth and questions about who will provide training. So this transition is not without challenges, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I think the last point that I would like to raise is around technology. So for the first time, thanks to interoperability and associated technologies, we can do these types of continental global frameworks qualifications. We have the technology to actually offer timely labor market data. If you look at initiatives like Burning Glass, for example, and we can partially automate curriculum reform, which I know is something that UNESCO is actually working on. We can leverage micro-credentials, we can leverage things like credential mapping, and we can build truly flexible learning pathways in which learning outcomes are fixed and time is flexible, as opposed to what we have now, where kind of the time is fixed and the outcomes are very flexible. And we need to move more in that first direction. The question really is whether we choose to make the types of investments that are going to be necessary. So one of the major initiatives that JET is involved in right now is around this. South Africa has what we call sector education and training authorities, and they support initial or continuing lifelong education in particular sectors. So there's one for education, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. Currently, JET is collaborating with the Manufacturing, Engineering, and Related Services Sector Authority, which is called MRCETA for short, to create what we're calling an interoperable data ecosystem. Essentially, MRCETA sits at the center of an ecosystem which includes students, employers, training providers, all working in this particular sector. And the purpose of the work that we're undertaking is to increase the efficient use of data within this sector, allow citizens to make informed labor market decisions based on industry needs, and help governance bodies, in this case MRCETA, to leverage data to perform more effectively through increased partnerships, data sharing with the education system and the labor market. It can improve credential comparability between the different institutions within that ecosystem, and it can also improve the responsiveness of available credentials, qualifications, and curriculum. And it also opens the door to the types of initiatives that we've been talking about today about timely transformation of curricula and qualifications and skills. I think I will stop there because I was only given 5 minutes, but I could go on about the different contributions that NGOs can make. But thank you very much for your time. And if there are more questions, you can access me at kelly@jet.org.za, or I've registered. So thanks.
Thanks a lot, Kelly. Yeah, thank you for giving these perspectives, especially with a look towards the future and the way forward. That's a good closing spirit for this event already. I would still like to give the floor to Ms. Joanne Koh from Temasek Polytechnic in Singapore, who also has the opportunity to give us some closing remarks or some reflections. Thank you.
Hi, so this is Joanne here. Good evening from Singapore. It's a pleasure to be here. Being here at the conference, it gives me a good idea of what I think my counterparts in Asia are doing, and also on what the European countries are doing in terms of new qualifications and accreditation. I think it wouldn't, for Asia itself, is huge, and I think in terms of economic developments, they are very varied, and I think most of the countries are at different stages, and with that, it is difficult to actually come together to decide, you know, in terms of TVET, what kind of qualifications and academic competencies is required. But coming from Singapore, I have some slides which I'm not sure, is it sharing or it's not? Okay.
Now it is, yeah.
It is. Great. Okay. Natalie, you can see the slides, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, great. Okay, so what happened is that I think in Singapore we have done things a little differently. A few years ago, we went on the industry transformation program, and when we went to that, we actually went for to the 23 other industries to take the opportunity to address issues within each industries. And in each industries, we look at the job and skills required. We talk about innovation, how do we increase productivity, and of course the internationalization of each industry. So in this little picture, you see the different stakeholders coming together, and education and training providers is actually one of the stakeholders that is involved in this industry transformation. So I think different from what the other sharing is that we have not intended to look at education in isolation. What happened was that we went to specific industries and look at how these industries is going to transform. And with that transformation, how do we prepare our people for it? So with that, the skills framework was actually developed. And in this skills framework, what it consists of is the career pathway for different industries that's going to be developed for different individuals. We look at specifically the job tasks and key tasks that is going to exist in each industry. And with that, the technical skills and competencies were created together with the generic skills and competencies. I think in the trends shared by Vera, it very much coincides with what was being shared today about the skills that is needed and how different stakeholders come together. And in this skills framework development, we have a tripartite kind of arrangement where we have the government, industries, trade unions, the training institutions to all come together to actually form task forces to look at and examine what is required of each person's job and what skills and competencies is required for them to be able to perform their job. So in very short, this is just one example of a skills framework for a built environment where it is the career pathway. We look at the vertical, of course, movement, and also laterally how professionals can actually move across different disciplines if they have the right skills. And in each one, we talk about how we can help them to grow and develop into and morph into each different job roles. And with that, I'm giving you some examples of the key tasks and the technical skills and competencies and the generic skills and competencies that is existing in the document itself. I will actually share the document later in the group chat. It's actually a website, and I think y'all can go and take a look. With that also, in today's context, I think when we look at the challenges we face, like I mentioned at my introduction, there are different stages of development, and we are all at different stages, and it's going to take a lot of time and process for us to coordinate and understand each other, and also to understand at each stages what are the specific needs required for training to happen. The time needed is actually very long. I mean, just completing one sector itself is going to take us a lot of time. And of course, certain industries may have very frequent changes, which is also outlined in one of the sharing by Vera, that in such industry where the changes are so frequent, how do we then make sure that the training actually catch up, if not be ahead of it? I think the last challenges we have is, of course, how do we then teach the soft skills? I think in some of the skills identified also in our own skills framework is entrepreneurship, digital literacy. I think you saw it in my earlier slides when we talk about lifelong learning. These are even empathy. So for trainers to actually bring that into the classroom, to then tell them and teach, our youth about empathy, it's not something that perhaps traditional pedagogy can actually follow through. So with that, I'm going to end my presentation since I'm the last item. I'm going to share the skills framework, like I said, on the group chat. And if there's anything, you can actually contact me here, and I'll be happy to discuss further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanne. Thanks a lot. So we have reached the end. I will hand over once more to our two wonderful moderators, Vera and Wilson. And thank you, everyone, for your participation. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalie. And with this input from Temasek, we finish our sessions on the identification, integration, and implementation of new qualifications and competencies. And I now invite Mr. Jens Lieb, Senior Program Expert at UNESCO-UNEVOC, who will give you the closing remarks. Jens, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Wilson. At the end of this rich conference, it's a pleasure to provide some concluding remarks. As we all know, and we've heard today, TVET is facing a variety of challenges globally, and it needs to react to these challenges to remain relevant to the world of work and attractive to the learners. Real attractiveness, as Mr. Deal has called it in his opening presentation. We also know that many TVET systems have to address these challenges with constrained resources, and that COVID-19 has certainly posed yet additional challenges and constraints to TVET systems. But crises can also be accelerators for overdue development, for example, on digitalization, as we can see currently, both in TVET training, but also in industry and commerce itself. Of course, no two TVET systems are exactly the same, and different countries face different challenges. And while in times of crisis, it is common to withdraw and take more of an inward focus, examples from other countries and systems can provide sparks of inspiration and encouragement for us. These examples are so important because they show what is possible and within reach if we act and take concrete steps towards implementing change. They are positive encouragement. Here, I would like to thank all the speakers for their presentation, as they showed concrete examples of what can be done on the ground to make sure that TVET is evolving such that it creates pathways for employment for learners and professionals. With BUILD, we want to create a platform to exchange on practical solutions to the most important challenges TVET is facing. And we would like to thank BMBF and BIBB for their support in making this possible. We know that there's much more to be shared among Asia, Africa, and Europe than we can cover in this online conference. So in this sense, this conference is only the beginning, and we look forward to exchange on such solutions further in the future. Before I hand back to my colleagues and we conclude this conference, I would like to conclude with 2 points. First, the separation that we have done here today with the systemic and the practical levels, they help us to narrow down particular challenges so that we can have a targeted discussion and address them appropriately. But this separation helps us better understand the identification, integration, and implementation of new qualifications and competencies. But let's not forget that this separation is somewhat artificial. Eventually, TVET systems need to function as a whole, and while each level has its key players, they need to understand, respect, and involve each other. And finally, let's foster a spirit of action and mutual support. Without taking action, there is no real progress. Through BUILD project and by involving the UNEVOC network at large, we can become such a platform for action. So please share your examples and reach out to one another. And in this spirit, I would like to close. Let's move to action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jens, for these inspiring words and your perspective on the topic. We have already reached the end of today's conference, unfortunately, but we're excited to continue our collaboration through the bridging component of the BUILD project. The result of the expert group's work on new qualifications and competencies will be presented at the BUILD Learning Summit in Q4 2021. Who knows, perhaps that will be a moment where we can again meet physically. In the meantime, we look forward to meeting you again digitally at the Europe, Africa and Europe, Asia Pacific workshops in Q2 and Q3 2020. We'll make sure to share an invitation with all of you. Thank you everyone for your attention. As a BUILD team, we are happy that you have taken the time to join this conference and actively take part in our discussions. Don't miss the chance to follow up on the examples presented today via the UNEVOC TVET forum. All presenters will be available until the end of the week to respond to your questions and discuss the identification, integration, and implementation of NQC. And before everyone leaves, we'd like to ask you to switch your cameras on to say goodbye so that we have a nice picture of the whole community. So please switch your cameras on. We'll now switch to mosaic view and see the diversity of participants who've joined. After the conference, you will receive a follow-up email with a feedback form. Your suggestions and remarks are more than welcome. And of course, feel free to contact us via phone or mail after the workshop for any questions that may arise. Thank you very much. And I'd like now to ask our technician to switch to mosaic view so that we can see everyone who's joined.
Seems like technology is challenging us at the very end of the conference. Well, it was a pleasure anyway. And do we still have a chance?
It does not seem to be working, but please don't hesitate to switch on your cameras anyways at the end so that we can see each other to say goodbye. We're very happy that you have joined today's conference. and we'll be happy to follow up with you.
Yes, thank you all very much for attending this meeting in the end of the year. We wish you a happy holiday season and hope meeting you again next year, hopefully in person, where we can exchange our great conversations that we are used to. So bye-bye to all of you.
It does work now.
And I hope to see you next year.
Nice mosaic view. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for joining. Hope to see you soon. Nice to see some familiar faces now on the videos. Bye, everyone. Goodbye. Have a good day.
Goodbye.
Have a good end of the year.